Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Deadline. I'm your host, Poochie Hill, and I'm here today with Frank Verducci Jr. We're in the summer now, and it's nice outside, and we're going to be talking about the importance of your last name, which is your greatest jewel. Your name is your most precious jewel because it represents your legacy of where you come from, who you are affiliated and associated with biologically, and most importantly, it gives you strength just as much as it can bring harm on you if you don't understand the importance of who you are, what your name is, and what you can become. What's going on, big guy?
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, let's jump right into it. How did you become an educator?
Well, I took a different route than most people. You know, having parents, having aunts and uncles that were all teachers, I thought maybe I would go in a little different direction. So I went to school for business. Went to Seton Hall University, graduated with a degree in accounting, went out and worked in the corporate world for roughly 10 years. And during that time period, I just kept getting that feeling like this isn't really right for me. You know, it was the 80s and corporations were losing that confidence, and there was no more feeling like the employee was important.
Okay.
So my dad had encouraged me during that period of time, you know, education's still out there for you. You can, you know, go back to school, you can get a certificate. So maybe that's something you want to think about. And I actually took him up on that advice and went back to school, got a Master's of Arts in Teaching and in elementary education. And from there, it just, you know, kept going. I mean,
what is the difference of, or should I say, is it more essential and rewarding as a teacher of elementary students than high school? Or what is the different makeup of that there, that there's a certain component in the individual that is the teacher? We're not speaking of the administrative part of you yet. The teaching part from high school and grammar school. You care to speak on that?
So my dad started out as a 5th grade teacher in Rutherford.
Okay.
And I saw the pictures of his classes, and he talked about the experiences of dealing with, you know, young adolescents. I never went that low in terms of the grade level. I started out in middle school.
What age is that?
Middle school was 13, okay, 12, 13-ish.
Just before junior high.
Yeah. And I was in Roselle Park. So Roselle Park at that time, their middle school was only 6th and 7th grade. It was a very interesting mix.
They have a beautiful wrestling program over there.
Wrestling was
Beautiful.
king. Wrestling was king. And, you know, I was lucky actually to get into education because I was what you considered an alternate route candidate. I didn't go the typical coursework to becoming a teacher because I had a business degree. But with that business degree, I was able to get certifications in business accounting, general business. So dealing with the middle school child seemed to me to be right. You know, that's a tough age group. They're trying to find themselves, getting ready. You know, where do we go next? You know, developing into a young adult. And so that was the premise of, you know, where I was, developing young minds to become young adults and get them ready for high school.
Well, you know, you were speaking of minds, and as your father has emphasized to so many of us as coaches and mentors and teachers and educators, you are developing a mind and protecting hearts. My question would be, are they as active now, you think, as they were when we were growing up, as the teachers, as far as actually hands-on teaching them, or is there a different disparity as far as their attention span?
I don't think it's really that different today than it was when we were growing up. What's different today is the technology. So when I got into teaching, there were no computers in the schools.
Data processing.
That's right. And that was, I guess, my niche, because I had experience using a computer from corporate and brought that over to, you know, a middle school setting. And in Roselle Park, they were just starting to get computers in the classroom. We were just getting onto the internet, you know, and it just exploded from there.
Is it a difference in the sizes of the classes in urban and suburban, or no?
I don't think the sizes are that different. You know, you're talking 25 to just under 30, depending on where you are.
Is it a difference in high school as far as the amount of pupils that are in a class?
Well, you know, from middle school, I did teach at the high school level. I was at Watchung Hills Regional back in the day, 2003 to 2006.
So that's what we're calling back in the day now, because we're older.
Yep, that's 20 years
back
ago.
In the day really is back in the day.
20 years is 20 years.
Yes,
it goes
yes,
by fast, right?
It does.
But that was a large regional high school, and depending on the course, it dictated how many students were in the classroom.
Really?
Yeah.
It's much larger because regional high schools enrollment is so much larger.
Yeah, I think the school had somewhere just shy of 2,000 students back then. I know it's larger now, but you had different municipalities that sent their students because it was a regional school.
Okay.
So you had Long Hill, you had Gillette, you had Greenbrook sent their students to Watchung Hills, and you had Watchung Borough that sent their students.
Warren Hill.
Watchung Hills.
Watchung Hill.
Yes.
Okay. That's Union County.
Watchung Hills is Somerset County.
Okay.
Warren Hills is up in Warren County.
Yeah. But you know, it's funny how I find that all the teachers and educators that I have had on the show, they have a passion, and I think the passion started early on with their parents, and being that both of your parents were educators. How was that easy for us, studying and things of that nature there? How did that come into play too? Did you have good study habits? Or?
Well, you know, studying was always emphasized in the house. You couldn't do anything until you were done with your homework. You know, when I got older, middle school, high school, late middle school, high school, it was more like, you know, you're on your own now. You have to make your own choices, and you're going to have to live with the consequences of what those choices are. You know, I'm not going to sit here at the kitchen table like we did when I was in first and second grade or so. You know, as you got older, that was it. You had to make it on your own. You had to do it on your own.
There wasn't no milk and cookies waiting for you right after.
It wasn't really like that. You know, I mean, you see that on TV, some of the older shows, but it wasn't like that in my household. You know, there was somebody home. I was lucky enough to have my mom at home when I got home from school, but eventually she went back to work as a teacher when my youngest sister entered middle school. So, you know, it was nice. It was nice to have that, but as we got older, Mom was working too. And, you know, thank God for Mom, because Mom came home from school and made dinner for everybody, you know. We all sat down and ate together, which is not something that happens all the time today.
True.
You know?
Well, going that we've migrated right over to that theater, how important, or I have found through research, and I know personally, I had a great daddy. You have a great daddy.
Thank you.
There is a difference in a daddy and a father. Do you care to parlay on that there? That's a nice discussion.
Well, you know, I think to me what was important was when my mom was home, my dad was the sole provider for myself and my three sisters. So you've got 4 children at home, and you've got your spouse, your wife, your partner, and he was out working. He was making a living to support all of us, and I didn't get to see him most of the time until later in the evening, and it was usually Mom bringing him dinner when he got home from, you know, coaching, right? Because he coached basically every season, and by the time he got home, it was 7:30, maybe 8 o'clock, you know, and there wasn't a lot of time for chatting at that point because Mom had to go over the events of the day with him, and then maybe you got a chance to chime in there. So that was important from that aspect of he was a father figure, he was my father, and I had to respect the line between father and daddy.
Now, can you explain for those that do not really understand the differentiation, because being a father, any male can be a father because you're equipped from God to make children.
Right.
But a daddy is someone, which I had, that takes the time, that finds the time, and is interested in what you're doing daily. And it's of great importance to him. Now, that's not saying that a father, we're speaking of the baby boomers now, we're the last of the baby boomer generation. Now, older father and grandfathers, they were basically providers, the shepherds, protectors, and putting food on the table and shelter over you and I. So I don't want that to be mistaken as being a father is a bad title. It's formal, but a daddy is much more genualic in the aspect of embracement. When you speak of my daddy, just like a daddy's little girl.
Right.
So daddy's, that's my daddy. That's more embracing than that's my father. And you can differentiate the closeness, the cohesiveness of that relationship through what has been said through rhetoric, correct?
Yes.
Okay, we've established that. Now let's go to this. You was walking the sidelines a long time, from season to season to season, and you was a pretty decent baseball player yourself.
No, not really. I didn't really excel at any athletics until I got to high school, and I figured out that cross country and track were really what I was good at. You know, everybody's got to find themselves.
Yes.
There was no pressure to play football because, as you said, I was with my dad from late August until Thanksgiving Day. So there was no time for me to become involved in town Pop Warner or Pee Wee or whatever was going on at that time, because, well, number one, I don't think he really wanted me to play football necessarily. I know my mom definitely didn't want me to play football. I didn't have the athletic abilities, the eye-hand coordination, and sometimes your parents, they don't have to tell you not to do something. You could figure it out on your own, but I enjoyed being with him. I mean, I looked forward to the end of August, double sessions with the guys. I mean, I was 9 years old, 10 years old, and then the ride home, we would talk about the day. You know, I'd ask him about the players. He would talk to me a little bit about what this person was doing, what that person was doing. After games, I'd ride home with him, obviously, after games, and sit in the car and ask him, gee, why did that guy do that? Or how come that play didn't work? You know, it was very rare that my dad in his career lost, so there was a lot more winning rides home than there were losing rides home.
Well, you know, I personally am blessed to have a lot of the journals that you wrote in reference from 1969 to 1981. Each and every player, each and every article from the papers in New Jersey, and it spoke of different characteristics and activities that was going on during the game. And from a perspective of you running track and running cross country, that right there within itself is a different athlete, because cross country you're dealing with yourself mentally.
Yep.
And as you stated, from a scholastical perspective, liking numbers like you do, the calculation of the paces, the calculations as you're running the pavement, looking at the scenery and inhaling, exhaling, counting your pace mentally, that's a whole nother athlete. But the strategicness of having that closeness with your father and the coach, which was separate but one, you were able to navigate for yourself your own little niche, whereas it transcended over to now you're a coach in the classroom.
That's right.
And you go from being a teacher to the administrative aspect. Now, how was that being the head coach? You were a coach as a teacher. But now you are the head, one of the head coaches, being a department head. How was that?
Well, when you have your own classroom of 25, 30 kids, whatever it is,
A position coach.
yeah, you gotta know those 25 kids, and you don't really have to worry too much outside that, right? But when you become an administrator, now you've got several hundred children or students that you are responsible for. And how do you make those connections like you would make in the classroom, right? Connections are very important
That's
when you're an
through
educator.
Your department heads. That's your coaching staff.
Right, right.
Great. We coincide with that pretty good. Now I'm going to go into something that really cuts me kind of deep. You know, I took a lot of losses going against Barringer. A lot of losses during my time. And as I must put out there, when I first met your father, maybe 30 years ago, when I first met him, and he voted me into the Hall of Fame, I told him personally, I said, I don't care nothing about you. I lost too much to you. And as time prevailed, continued to articulate, I grabbed him and hugged him and told him, I said, I love the man, but I can't stand the coach. But as time continues to revolve, I understand that the man was the coach, and the coach was the teacher, and the teacher was the administrator of understanding that it's a kid's game, football, but the lessons from it. Would you care to speak on that there? Because
absolutely.
You've been around when he has spoke to the Dexter Cumberlanders, the Robbie Wrights, the Pete Shaws, the Cedric Shaws, and the Keith Hunts. Now I'm coming up to our time. Unfortunately, the Norm Grangers and the Byron McMillans, you know, these guys, and the Andre Williams and Mr. Wesley Green, and Mr. Curtis Green, but
Yeah.
you understand, so go ahead
yeah,
on. I done
yeah.
gave Barringer enough now.
Wow. Well, listen, my dad's a Newark guy through and through.
Yes, he is.
Born, raised, and he went back to his alma mater to spend his career, which you don't see that happen too often. He loved the City League. You know, it was comprised of 7 high schools, and during that time frame that he was coach, that 13-year period from 68 to 80, he was only interested in what was best for all of his student athletes, but the school overall. He believed in the motto of the school. He believed in every one of its students. He talks about Mr. Daniels, the band director. He would have his kids watch Mr. Daniels run a band practice, because Mr. Daniels was a coach too, even though they weren't playing a sport. But they had to prepare in a similar way to perform on Saturday.
To look right to the visitors and the spectators, looking at the formations of the different lines, this going this way and that going that way, and keeping in step.
Yeah, and he would always be a pro Newark, pro anything that had to do with Newark, and he would always be pro City League, because there were so many people that were, in my opinion, jealous and envy of the man and of the city.
Because of the City League.
That's right. That's right.
You know, I've learned over time in research that Newark, New Jersey, had the largest and only City League because it's the largest municipality within the state. So you don't have regional high schools.
Right.
Also, I'd like to bring to the forefront, too, we cannot forget, I did get a chance and a stint with your uncle. And a couple of things didn't work out right, not on the football aspect, but I had to end up going to Weequahic. My mother said, you're not going to West Side, and you're not going to Central. I went over to Weequahic, and that was a whole nother world open to me, and it worked in my favor. But I want to say that all of the coaches of that time were mostly from Coach McLucas, Vinnie Finch, Jesse Jones, were products of the Newark Board of Education.
And all good friends with my dad.
And they all came back to enrich this city that we are native sons of.
Listen, the rivalry in the city, I don't think anybody really could understand that.
Unless you were here.
Unless you were there and you were participating. It didn't matter that Central may not have won a game.
But they'd hurt you.
They came to play.
They would hurt you.
It was just...
The score didn't show it.
That's right. It was just like...
East Side and Central and West Side would hurt you.
They showed up to play. And they would have you on their calendar. Oh, we playing Barringer? All right, we got to get up for that game. And everybody did. There was nobody that lied down and said, well, we'll just walk all over you. It didn't work that way.
But
yeah, some of the scores were lopsided, there's no doubt.
But you know, the camaraderie, we're going to go straight to the street. Crime, all sorts of things that embellish in an urban city of the northeastern sector of the country, here, New York, Philadelphia, can gobble you up. But if you were an athlete, that was your pass to go any and everywhere. You could go on East side of town or Barringer side of town with your jacket on. You had to be kind of tough. But if you were a player that played and represented your school, you were respected. And the athletes of that area that you was in would protect you. And we'd see each other Saturday and go to war. And at night, go and have a good time together at the YMCA or the basement parties or whatever. I often wonder, and I think about it because you see the camaraderie amongst all of us, black, white, Chicano, whatever it was at that particular time and continues to be, is that there was a certain embellishment of fire inside of you to compete.
Absolutely.
I don't see that a lot now. Do you?
I think technology has really changed the way people interact with one another. You know, we have these cell phones. It's basically a mini computer in the palm of our hand.
Do you remember any telephone numbers now? That's the first
I remember my home phone number from when I lived in...
Michelob 3452
Yep.
and all of that there.
Yep.
And what's funny is that you had to go to the library, your neighborhood library.
Absolutely.
Or you had to go downtown.
Yep, absolutely.
You had to do the research.
But I just want to come back to a point that you were bringing up before. When I was growing up, I didn't see any divisiveness with my dad's teams. If anything, I saw him preach being a unit and respecting one another and getting along with one another.
And working for you.
And working with each other. Listen, he had student athletes that came through that did not have a father at home, biological father at home. They were being raised by their moms.
In particular, do you care to speak of some? I know some.
There's so many that I could.
Well, you're a Hall of Famer for one.
Sure, yeah, Andre Tippett, yeah. His mom, had him come to Barringer High School because he couldn't get along with the folks at Westside.
Hubert Smith, lunatic.
Yeah, lunatic, tick, yeah.
God bless him. He's just passed on, we were told. But these individuals, let's put it out there. Irvington had turbulence also. Certain schools, Vailsburg had turbulence. Barringer had turbulence. You have to understand that this is the early or the mid-'60s, whereas there's a geographical shift going on. And at that time, you were separated in the aspect of what you were told, not what you knew, what you read. And we have found that the coaches, in particular your father, that was not an easy task, but being a Newarker it was easy for him.
Well, that was his strength, being from Newark. Nobody could put anything over on him. But I wanted to say before too that, you know, I saw him as not only my father, I saw him as a father or a mentor, whatever you want to call it, to young men that did not have any guidance and direction. I know he went in his pocket and gave his student athletes money to buy something to eat after a game. I saw that.
Clothes.
All
of the coaches of
I
that
saw
time,
those things.
Coach Adams,
Yep.
Coach Finch, Coach Jones, all of the coaches of that time believed in the most important natural resource we had, as we were speaking of off camera. We're now in that position.
That's happening today because I know Coach Logan does that.
Yes.
I know the basketball coach at Westside has done that. He's created a whole program at the school there to help students understand responsibility. Bar Cook,
yes.
Yep. So there are still people doing it. I'm not saying he was the only one, but he was a pioneer in my eyes.
Well, we're only a link in a chain.
That's right.
Of that which we were blessed to see and try and emulate.
So going back to what you said, as a young boy, 9 years old, I'm 9 years old in 1970, and 1971, he goes to Atlantic City. They go to Atlantic City to play a game, second game of the season.
That's pretty good.
Atlantic City had good teams, and he had people around him that raised money so that the team could go the night before and spend the night in Atlantic City.
How many had ever done that?
He was the first. As far as I know, he was the first.
And
as a 10-year-old boy,
how many of those young men had ever been out of the city of Newark?
I think none. I think none.
That right there within itself again goes to the administrator, the teacher, the coach, the mentor, the surrogate father, to expose kids as you as an educator. The thing that we're basically that
experiences.
The main thing that I'm finding is that you only emulate that was done for you.
That was.
And if you don't emulate it, it has to have a certain amount of trust for that young lad, LAD, to come into the fold.
When I say he was a pioneer, you know, that's just one way he was a pioneer. He wrote a grant. He was the first guy to have videotape in the city of Newark. He got a Sony video camera with the tape, the old reel-to-reel tape.
Big tape.
And guess who got to use it? I got to use it. You know, so in 1972, 11 years old, handling this, it was probably $1,000 piece of equipment.
Big.
It wasn't that big, but you needed a tripod, and I needed somebody to be, you know, help carry that stuff around with me. And we would come back after the game and sit in the locker room, load up the tape, and watch it on a big TV. Now, he was the first one to do stuff like that. And from there, I just became his photographer then, because the fella that did it, you know, took the game films, was no longer interested or didn't have time for it. And so, you know, here I am, it's 1973, 74, went from videotape to I'm doing the game films for him.
So you know how to break down film.
Well, I don't know if I know how to break it down. I sat in many of a basement watching film, you know. His craft was special, and he was a special master at his craft.
That was a God's given gift.
No doubt about it. I could never, in my wildest dreams, think about doing what he did. He just had the knack, he had the eye for what he was doing, and, you know, again, I'm a proud son saying that about my dad.
But
I think
you got to speak also of how the offensive guru is your father. The defensive guru is your uncle.
Right.
Now, they both used to sit together and actually break down the film.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But they never, I don't think, scrimmaged against each other.
They did scrimmage.
They did?
They absolutely scrimmaged. They never played each other because their mother wouldn't let them, and they respected their mother, just as we all respect our moms. But they would sit. I would be over at the house. He would be at his sister's house. in Glen Ridge, or we'd be over for a summer barbecue or whatever it was. And my cousins and I would be sitting around listening to them talk and whatnot. My uncle was the old-fashioned 10 yards, cloud of dust, pound it down your throat. My dad, in his first 2 years, I think tried to be a little bit like that, but then he went to more of an I formation, veer offense later on, and he had some talented people.
Now, I would like for you to explain to the audience, I know, a veer. What is a veer line? Just something simple for them.
You know, I'm not sure if I'm going to do it justice by explaining what the veer offense is. I mean, he had talented athletes who could run and throw the ball. So he was able to take those talents, and you know, it wasn't all about the 10 yards in a cloud of dust.
Well, see, with the 10 yards in a cloud of dust, everything starts on the line of scrimmage where the game actually begins. It's a mano-mano. Physical against physicality and physical. Whereas with the veer line, it's an imaginary line. They are more technical, whereas if the quarterback goes to the right, the line has the mobility to move over there just enough to give him enough time to execute the pass. So a veer line is basically a movable line, but an imaginary line that doesn't just stay there for the cloud of dust as you're speaking. I had to make sure Uncle Frank understood that I did listen very well, and I did get that. I had to kind of rub that in on you. Now, we're going to get to the good segment. Why is your father so phenomenal in the aspect, not only to you, but so many others? I think coaches and all.
Yeah, I think that the people that really know him know that he was an honest guy. He would always tell you the truth, whether you wanted to hear it or not. But everybody's truth is different, and people can bend the truth, right?
What is his favorite saying? Apostle Paul.
Am I therefore to become your enemy because I tell you the truth? It was posted right in his office when you walked into the gym.
That's the office in the gymnasium when I went over there to wrestle. And I seen this picture of Rosie Greer and your father.
Yeah, yeah.
And my great uncle, Boo Boo Barron. They all played together in the college all-star game.
Yep.
Right in Jersey City at the Armory. And I'm looking at this, and I'm an Indian, got my uniform on, getting ready to go wrestle. And I'm looking, and I said, that's Rosie Greer. And then years, decades later, we talked, we laughed. I've seen other letters and stuff, how they kept in contact, still keep in contact because they're both around the same age now. And it's something how Newark has so many individuals of great statute status and that are, I would say, approachable. That we don't have to go abroad. You have people that are here, but why is it that we have to be accepted elsewhere before we're accepted here? Did he have his first job coaching in Newark, or was it somewhere else first?
Well, when he was in Rutherford, the athletic director, he was friends with the athletic director in Rutherford, and because he was in the elementary school got out later than the high school, and his principal didn't really want him, making that move, that transition to the high school, because she wanted him to stay where he was. I know he coached at Central.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. He was an assistant. I mean, he was at Oratory Prep. He was at Central. And I believe he was at Westside at one point. I mean, I have his whole biography that I haven't memorized or studied.
That was in Central, too.
Yeah, he was a business teacher, actually. Yeah, that's true.
That Verducci name is phenomenal in the state of New Jersey and abroad. Not with just football, but with treating people right.
That they were instilled those values from their parents. I never met my grandfather. He passed before I was born. But the stories that I hear from my aunts, from my dad, he was a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. And everybody knew the family. Where they grew up, everybody knew them, and there was a lot of respect. There was a lot of respect for the name. Whether it was because of what my uncles were doing or what my dad was doing. Listen, he is 5.
The youngest. He is the youngest.
He was the baby, Christmas baby.
Now it says in the yearbook In his yearbook, I think 1958, or was it 59?
Oh, he was out of school 51, I think. He
I
graduated
have it.
51.
And I'm very fortunate. And I said that some of the things that he parlayed to me, I would take to Barringer and have them display that if the individuals in Barringer understood the important, the severity is the word I'll use, of this great man that gave his heart and soul to his alma mater and to the city of Newark. Not just athletically, but from an educational and an administrative position. Concept. I will not retrieve or release those jewels and treasures that I have until I know, and I'm putting it out there to the faculty of Barringer, unless they're going to display them. He's still living, walking, and talking, and he should be admired and held in high regard because of his alma mater, his neighborhood, and he's still a Newark guy to this day, and he's still coaching and mentoring us right now. And I say that there with nothing but pride and appreciation of knowing, as I said, you're my brother from another mother. But the things that I have, I refuse, because a lot of people don't know that he was a basketball coach too, and beat Weequay when they
Stopped
had
their 40 game winning streak.
Dream team. So these are some treasures and artifacts and actual jewels that were given to me that I will relinquish to Barringer High School, the Blue Bears, if they're going to display them where they should be displayed for those incoming generations to see that you must give back. Now, we're going to get to the good part. From 68 to 80, give me some of those diehard Blue Bears that...
Wow, that's a 13-year stretch.
1 year. I think it was 69. We split the championship with you all.
I don't remember that. 68 and 69, he was 5-4.
We tied.
Yeah, Weequay won the city championship, I think, outright. But after that, from 70 to 80, he won 8 city league championships.
So you set me up on my own show to throw that right back at me? That's a brother. And I'm the oldest.
It was only 2 years he didn't win in that time frame. I mean, it's incredible when you look at that record.
Yes.
For anybody.
But we have to also speak of how he stood up for all of the students in the city of Newark.
Absolutely. He went to battle.
Strength of schedule.
He went to battle.
And no one knows of it.
Nobody understands it. That's really what it is.
Still prevalent today.
I think, John Brooks, one of his players. Okay.
Heck of a track runner.
Yes, he was.
Of a football
Yes, he was, and a
Heck
football
of a
player.
guy.
And he's a great guy. I
Him
still
and
talk
his
with
brother
John.
Timmy both. I played against Timmy.
I shared with John a while ago, and John knows that Coach fought for the student athletes in Newark.
Newark, not Barringer.
Nope.
Newark.
Nope, it was Newark, because when they didn't get in the playoffs in '79, and I felt sorry for Keith Hunter and Norm Granger, because they had a fantastic team. Their only loss was to Montclair, and it was less than a touchdown. Okay, and they didn't get in, and so his friend at Passaic, the athletic director over there, Boverini, and the coach, I can't think of the coach's name now, they got together and they initiated a lawsuit against the state association, which didn't pan out until years later, after a hearing in front of the Commissioner of Education, who then said that the scheduling was inherently discriminatory, and the City League had to be disbanded, because the City League proved that they tried to get into other conferences.
Yes.
They were being discriminated against because of their schedule, and it was being held against them, i.e. the student athletes. And finally, when the decision came out, I think it was sometime in the early 80s, the state ordered that the City League be disbanded and you could apply to a new conference, which they all did and got into various different conferences at that point.
I want to say, and I don't think I'm wrong for saying this here, and I hope it's falling on ears of concern. When you took away the city league championship from the schools that are in the city of Newark, you really abandoned and destroyed the pride amongst the students and the athletes within the city, within the different neighborhoods of the 5 wards.
Right.
Now, to play amongst yourself, to have your own pride, whereas I see you 30 days from today, you beat me, but we battled, that is very, very instrumental in the aspect that gives you pride and homage of a brotherhood of competition on an athletic field. Whereas now, you don't have that, because I can live in the Barringer section, and if I'm in a magnet school, I can go and play all the way over there, or all the way over there, or in another city completely. Now, if you look and check it out, like Payne High, beautiful school, but now, is Payne High going to have a football team? Because they would have a much more pull if they put a football program in that school. They would have a much more pull from enrollment than even the different disparity of the schools playing in these other conferences now because of the enrollment. So what he spoke of then is very, very much applicable now, but they have destroyed pretty much the pride and the legacy.
It's more about, in my opinion, rivalries. The city league, it was a rivalry, and you respected, like you said, you went to war, but at the end of the day, we're neighbors. We know each other, and
we go to grammar school together. Then
exactly.
We go to high school. You live on that side, I live on this
but
side.
it was this rationale by people that weren't really educators, and when I say that, I say the state association. Why did they institute playoffs in 1974? The first year that they had head-to-head competition. I don't have to remind you, Barringer was undefeated. Westfield was undefeated. Morris Knowles was undefeated.
True.
But they put Bloomfield in, who was 7-1.
7-1.
And they played Morristown down in Atlantic City. Well, who made that decision?
8-1 is still
A
more
bunch
than
of accountants,
7-1, or 8-0.
a bunch of accountants down in wherever their headquarters was, used some kind of convoluted rating system to say that, well, you played Central and Central didn't play anybody, or the record was this, that, and the other thing. So we can't give you any points for that, or however they came up with it. Now, I'm sure Bloomfield had a good team, but they weren't undefeated.
Well, I'm going to say this. Stay there. Don't lose your thought. 8-0 and 7-1, there's a difference.
Absolutely.
Mathematically. Next in line is, as we were taught, and cultivated to understand, you put your pads on the same way I put on mine. Regardless of your size, regardless of your ethnicity, and your social residency. We all compete the same way.
And I'm not even saying that Barringer should have been in the playoffs in 1974. I'd have been just as happy to see Westfield or Morris Knowles or whoever was undefeated at that time play Morristown.
Undefeated is undefeated.
But you know what? That's what transcends this whole discussion. There's people out there, of course, that say, well, somebody's got to be number one or somebody's got to be better than somebody else. And we got to play it on the field. That's true. But you're dealing with hearts and minds here. You're not the NC2A that's making big money off of kids, okay? You're talking about 16, 17, maybe 18-year-old kids that are going out and playing a game that should be pure. Why do we need to have a championship anyway? It's to appease all those other people, right? It's to make money for an state association, isn't it? And so they went from 2 teams to 4 teams in 1975. Now, God shined down on Barringer that year because they almost didn't make it, right? They tied Shabazz the last game before the cutoff and made it into the playoffs. Played Irvington, a great team,
right over there at
a school stadium.
I remember that.
That's right, 7-6. A great game. they, they fell flat the next week against East Orange, unfortunately. But
Their rival.
Their rival for years and years and years.
The longest rival in New Jersey.
And even that was
Essex, for sure.
that was shut down because of, in my opinion, politicians, people getting involved in stuff that they shouldn't have been involved in. But coming to a game against Livingston, heavily
favored.
Livingston heavily favored. Barringer, they shouldn't even be on the field with them.
Group 1 and Group 4.
Well, they were both Group 4.
At that time, that's the old Big Ten.
They were Group 4s, but walk out of there with a 1-point victory. That was the epitome of coming to the mountain and winning it all. But it didn't stop there. 75 went to 76, and unfortunately, Coach got hurt in the beginning of the year. I think that might have been the strike year at the Newark schools. Yeah, and so that was a team, unfortunately, that didn't, I think, rise to their level of.
Was that Haroum in them?
No, I don't think he was 76.
That might have been 76.
Yeah, no, 76. They were
after
like 6-2. They didn't even play a full schedule that year. But then, wow, you come into 77, and you got a great team there. You got Westfield and Barringer going to the Meadowlands.
That was
37,000 people.
There has not
record
been that
to date.
many till this day.
To date, right? And you've got kids on that team that Dr. Kevin West, right?
Beautiful.
Quiet guy.
Heck of a wrestler, too.
Heck of a wrestler, He was on that team. He's a superintendent today. He worked in Newark, he worked in Irvington, he worked in Rosedale, East Orange. A quiet guy, you'd never know he played football. You look at him and say, man, that guy, he played football.
Heck of a wrestler.
But a smart guy. Again, there's
real
people,
guy.
a real guy. There's people that came through the system. Not everybody was,
super jock.
Exactly.
But the lessons, again, it goes back to, it's a kid's game, but the vehicle that you use to get to where you envision yourself to be.
And what I remember from that year, which is kind of interesting, is that Westfield was the higher seed, and they were going to play the game in Westfield. And as I recall it, as a young boy, and the stories that I heard or witnessed, my dad said, "Are you crazy? You're going to take a city of Newark and put it in Westfield? You got the 1 and 2 teams in the state playing for a championship? You're out of your minds."
Yeah.
How are you going to secure that facility? He was more about, it wasn't just to play in the Meadowlands.
But if you think about it now, Frank, where would all of those people been? It would have caused a ruckus because of the fact that Westfield is a township, if I'm not mistaken. And the population that came to the game almost doubled that of the population.
I think they could hold 3,500 on a good day at their facility. Yeah. So, again, what an experience for those kids. I was so happy for those kids. Listen, playing in the Meadowlands, now today they do it all the time. Yeah. But back then, there weren't a lot of schools that got to play there. Okay? You got to have special shoes. You got to go to practice a couple of days during the week to get used to the field. And it just went on from there, 78, 79. We can
also speak of, my phone is steady, I don't know what I did to it, but I want to also speak of the supporting boosters and the bodegas and things of that nature there when you had schools playing in the city rivalry of the city league. You had more boosters. You had people from the neighborhood that had pride and that would help, that were alumnus and things like that there. Whereas now, you don't see that there.
Listen, you remember back in the day, right? Unterman Field. Was there anywhere to sit there?
Never. Outside the game.
A city league game. It didn't matter who was playing. Everybody showed up, right?
That was the happening.
That was the happening of the day, whether it was 11 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? They went from afternoon games to morning games.
You know for a fact that Barringer always played early. Those that got up that came to the game would go to that game, and by 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, everybody's on the other side of town to the Weekway Shabazz game. It was certain games you just had to get to. East Orange, Barringer, West Side Central, Weekway, South Side. It was always something going on because that was the happening. If you were an athlete, basketball, football, baseball, all of those sports, not just football, they have now been destroyed because they took away the city league. So my question is now, I'm still coaching. What do you give the kids that don't make all county? It was a big thing to make the Star Ledger or the Daily News.
Yep.
Orange and Easton still have their all orange team. Newark doesn't, and they're the largest city in the state of New Jersey.
Well, look what happened to the media, right? There's no more newspaper. I mean, there is a newspaper,
It's
but
online.
it's online. Who's getting a newspaper delivered to their house? And I delivered the Star Ledger for 6-7 years.
Don't talk about it, because I delivered the milk too. Yes, yes. We're going back, speaking of a time that it seemed, I would say it seemed far and fetched, but it gave you character. You didn't have a problem bagging groceries. You didn't have a problem cutting someone's lawn after you did your own lawn or washing someone's car. So these are the things, and we understand that time articulates and continue to revolve forward, but if you don't give kids a certain amount of leeway to expand their horizon in competition and amongst themselves, as far as debate teams, as far as acting with the arts and things of that nature there. This is what I've seen, how it wasn't the individuals in Newark so much. It was the outside that has helped to differentiate, despair those that are in the city. So within saying that there, I want to say we have to get involved more as Newark residents, as parents, as coaches, as mentors. You have a lot of people around that are still here that can give you the truth, that can give you the stories, and will give them to you, because if you are not conscientious of that prevailed before, history says you are bound to do it again.
It's true.
Let me say this to you as we're winding down. In 1970, who was your best back over in Ballinger?
1970, they were 7-2, and they had Cumberlander, Shaw, and Wright.
I picked the wrong year. Unfortunately, I know the answer. First of all, those three guys, that's a 3,000-yard backfield. And it's ironic that the kids that are coming through Ballinger right now don't know who they are. Are there any artifacts up or things of that nature? No, I have them. You need to display them for the kids that are coming through now. 1975.
Cedric Shaw.
And Haroon Majid.
Haroon Majid.
See, these are names of guys that played for Ballinger. Also, I have to put out there that Ballinger High School, the original Ballinger High School, is the third oldest high school in the United States of America. There's a lot of pride over there. It used to be called the First Ward. You had a lot of immigrants that came there and migrated there, and it was a combustion of so many ethnicities, but they became winners. Prominently known for football. You have individuals like Donald Payne that played football. Harry Smith played football. Frank Verducci, Tony Verducci, and on and on and on. These are individuals that you all need to look up and understand. They're right from the same concrete geographical jungle that you came from. Pride, hope, determination, and focus. I want to say this to you on television. You're blessed to have a father, a friend, a mentor that has given so much. And I thank you, I thank your mother and your sisters for sharing your father with so many of us just because.
Wow, that's awfully nice of you to say. I really appreciate that.
It's the truth, because so many that have benefited from his association and affiliation and shepherding have not taken the time to thank you all. And on that, I want to say to you, and I'll let you close or whatever you have to say, thank you so much. My brother.
My brother from another mother, for
Yes,
sure.
sir.
Listen, I don't know really how to close on that. You know, it's really an honor to hear you say that. I never felt like I was sharing him. I always
You
knew
were.
he
Still
came
are.
home at the end of the
Still
day
is.
and was
Still
with
is.
us, but I knew how much he loved every one of the students, whether it was somebody playing for him or didn't play for him. I've heard all the stories, you know, people that couldn't get along with a teacher or were causing a ruckus in a class, and they would come down to his office and look around and see all the memorabilia and whatnot. And he just had this aura. And I think as a young man at the time when he first got there, you know, he was 30, 35 years old, 36 years old, to see someone that young with that much charisma and an ability to relate to people and get them to work together. And his staff, I have to say, he had wonderful coaching staffs. Sol Johnson.
One of the first doctors that I knew of that was on the Barringer staff that traveled with them.
Mm-hmm.
And within closing, I have to repeat this. Rob me of my money, and you rob me of nothing. Rob me of my name, and you rob me of my most precious possession. And I can't do no more than to say, but as I close every show, before we can love all people, we must first love ourselves. And as it states, you rob them of nothing if you rob them of their money. Your last name is your most precious jewel. And this is Frank Verducci, Jr. Thank you, and I'll see you on another episode of Deadline.